Hi everyone. So today is Q&A day, okay? If you have questions, put them in the comments. We're here to answer your questions. I'm here to answer your questions. If you are new here, I am U.S. Immigration Attorney Lilian Chukura, and I help my clients get green cards and citizenships for themselves and their families using the U.S. immigration law system. So if you have questions and you are joining me live, please go ahead and put them in the comments. That's literally what today's all about, answering your questions. Some people did send me questions ahead of time, and I will be answering those as we go along. But if you are joining live and you have questions, put them in the comments. All right. All right. So let's get started. All right. So the first question I have here is, how long is the process? I'm waiting for my husband and he has to file from I-131A. So typically, if you are filing an I-131A, that's a boarding foil for you to come to the US. If you lost your card, your green card while you are traveling abroad and you need to come back to the US, you need to file that. Typically, it just depends on the embassy on how quickly they're scheduling those appointments. Each embassy has their own time frame. Each embassy has what they do. So it really just depends. I've had some that were within a couple weeks of contacting the embassy, they were able to get the I-131A appointment to get the board and foil. So it really comes down to how long the embassy is taking to schedule those appointments, but it should be a quick process. It should not be something that takes like a year. All right. All right. Next question. There seems to have been an update where everything application wise has to be done online now. No, actually. So there are certain forms that are filed online, but most forms are still not available to be filed online. So those ones are the ones that can be filed online. USCIS wants you to file it online. So they want you to create that online account. They want you to get all your stuff through that online account. This makes it a lot easier for them, less paper, because when you send stuff in on paper, they have to scan it into the system anyway. But because they haven't made all their forms online yet, they're still, majority of the forms have to be filed on paper. Now, the forms that can be filed online can also be filed on paper. To give you an incentive to file your forms online, USCIS will give you a $50 discount. So if you file online, you'll get a $50 discount. If you file on paper, that means you're going to pay the full amount. So for example, the I-130, the filing fee, if you're filing online, is $625. If you're filing on paper, it's $675. So that's where that is. You don't actually have to file any of the forms online. The ones that can be filed online, I suggest you do that. But if you're not able to file it online, it's okay. They'll still accept it. You'll just have to pay more for those forms that are a little, that has the online version. But for example, the green card application, the I-485, cannot be filed online. You still have to file it on paper. And in that situation, if you're filing it on paper, you're filing it on paper. There's no separate fees. You're just paying that one fee. All right. So I see a question from Instagram. My I-130 has been in process since September, over 6 months, and it keeps updating from 2 months to 5 weeks to 2 weeks. Then it just keeps updating. Should I just keep waiting? Yes. The so I'm guessing you're looking at your online account and it's giving you a tracking and it's like, oh, you have a couple more weeks to wait. Oh no, now it's 5 months. Oh no, now it's 2 months. Oh wait, it's 6 months, right? It keeps changing because it's not accurate. Okay. That's what I can tell you. It is not accurate at all. In some situations, it may say 6 months and you get it faster, or it says 2 weeks and it takes a year. So do not look at that as something is wrong with your case. It keeps changing because they keep not meeting their own deadlines. Okay. So remember, what you go by is the processing time, not what it says on your online account, because again, those are not accurate yet. Even the processing time is not 100% accurate, but it is a whole lot better than that new thing that they're trying to push on their online account. Okay. So remember, look at the processing time. If it's a marriage based I-130, you're looking at a year to a year and a half in most situations. So if it's been 6 months and you haven't received approval notice yet, it's normal. You're still within the normal processing time. Okay. So the online account is just trying to give you a little more, they want to get it to a place. They want to get it to a place where they can actually predict how much longer before you can get an interview. That's what they want to do, but it is not there yet. It is nowhere near that yet. So you just have to go by the processing time and just know it's still within the normal processing time. Nothing is wrong with your case. It's just the system is not great yet. Okay. Until they dial it in and make it even better, that is just going to keep doing that. I can tell you that much, because I have clients that call me and freak out about that same thing. And I have to be like, calm down, normal processing time. We are still good. It's just their pilot program is not, it's not doing what it's supposed to do. All right. Let's see. Next question. I did the interview for my son birth abroad since March 6th, but did not receive the documents still. What should I do? So this is for the CRBA. This is for people that are registering the birth of their children that they had abroad while they were already a US citizen. Basically saying this child is already a US citizen. Just give me proof of their US citizenship, which is the registration of the birth abroad. When you have your interview, typically the officer will give an indication of what they plan on doing. Okay. Remember, you're putting an address where they can mail the CRBA to you. Okay. If it's approved, make sure that the address that you put is an address where you can actually get mail. So what I typically do for my clients when they're doing their CRBA is have their US address be the place that the certificate is sent, because again, you do not want to be in a situation where it's sent to an address where you can't actually get mail. So be really careful with that. And if that's the case, contact the embassy, see what the status of the CRBA is. Okay. And typically, once the embassy sends it, they will send you an email just letting you know that it has been sent. All right. We did one in March we did one in April in Mexico, and they already received it. So contact the embassy, see where your status is, but really it's that address. Make sure you're giving them the right address. Okay. So the next question, also on the CRBA, getting your child citizenship automatically. My daughter was born on March and I became a citizen in May. Can I apply online? No. So the CRBA is for children that are automatically a citizen because you were already a citizen when they were born. So if you were not a citizen when they are born, they do not qualify for the CRBA. So if the child is born in March and you become a citizen in May, unfortunately, the child is out of luck as far as the CRBA is concerned. You can look at doing the consular processing, so the I-130 with the US Embassy visa, and then when they get to the US, they will automatically become citizens once they enter the US with a permanent residency. Okay. But as they are right now, outside of the US, they will not be considered a citizen because you didn't meet the requirements before they were born. Okay. And if you are joining me live and you have questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. I am here to help you and answer any questions you may have today. All right. So just get into the next questions. Again, if you have questions, put them in the comments. And then one question I got before my live ended. Oh, do you take cases? Do you take clients from all states? Yes. I do take clients from all 50 states. I actually have clients outside of the US as well, depending on the type of case. Just saying that. But yes, I take clients from all 50 states. All right. So, trying to get to the questions because there's so many that come in, and we try to weed through them to make sure that we are answering all of them when they come in. All right. So last week, there was a question that came in at the end of the live. So I want to make sure that I cover it because I told the viewer that I will. So in that video, Mr. Tusk asked, having applied for an I-751 based on cruelty, what are the steps that would happen? So when you have a 2-year green card, you have to apply to remove the conditions on that conditional residency. And if you and your spouse are no longer together, or you're still together, but there has been cruelty, abuse, physical or mental in the relationship, you can file the I-751 to remove the conditions without your spouse. Right. So it's either you're filing jointly with your spouse to get the I-751 approved, to get the conditions removed, or you are filing on your own. And if you're filing on your own, there's 2 ways that you can do that, either with a divorce waiver, basically saying the marriage was real, but it ended in divorce, and here's my divorce certificate. Or you're saying that we're still married, we're not divorced, but I suffered abuse during the relationship, cruelty during the relationship. In that situation, the process is basically the same for all 3. Just what you need to provide is different. So if you're filing jointly, you need to provide evidence of your joint relationship, right? Your joint life together, that you're continuing to build a life together. But if you're basing it on divorce, you just have to show that you entered into the relationship for the right reasons, and that you two tried to build a life together. It just ended in divorce. For the cruelty, you show that you entered the marriage for the right reasons. You tried to build a life together, but your spouse was abusive, right? So it's different requirements. However, the process can be different, can be exactly the same, I should say. So once you file your application, you may get biometrics, and then after that, the case is just being processed. Okay, you may not hear from USCIS for several years. Okay, it can take up to 2 years to even get any update from USCIS. So they may ask for additional proof of the relationship, right? They may ask for additional proof of the relationship. They may ask for proof of the cruelty. They can ask you for different things, and you just have to provide that to USCIS. They can also schedule you for an interview. So this can be in all 3 situations. these things can happen. We had one recently where it was a divorce waiver, and USCIS sent a request for evidence for the divorce decree and additional proof of the relationship. We sent those in, and they actually approved it and sent us the green card without an interview. So that can happen in those situations as well. So in a cruelty case, USCIS can approve it without an interview. They can also schedule you for an interview. Either way, it's fine. You still have your chance to prove your case and to answer questions about your relationship. Okay. And once the officer finishes making a decision on your case, if they approve it, then you're good. And with a cruelty approval, that means that if you meet the requirements for citizenship, you can apply for citizenship within 3 years of getting your conditional residency. So the 3 years from the time that you got your 2-year card will still be able to be applied to you because you're applying under cruelty, not divorce. If you're applying through divorce, you have to wait the 5 years to get the permanent residency, to get the citizenship, I should say. Okay, so that is the basic process. It is really technically the same. It's just the documentation you need to provide to USCIS to prove your case is the only difference. All right. All right. Truck is asking, travel.gov is not letting me start my application for my childbirth abroad. What do I do? All right. So first off, just make sure what browser you're on, because sometimes the browser can be an issue. Okay. We on that office, we have Safari, Chrome, Firefox. We have all the browsers that are available to us because sometimes they work on one and not the other. So just try changing your browser for one. Two, just make sure that you are in the right website. Okay. It can be a little it can be a little crazy because sometimes there's multiple links and it just gets a little confusing, but just make sure you're in the right place. And really, really, the browser makes a huge difference. And try it at different times of the day as well. But if you are still having that issue, typically the government websites will have a technical support link on the bottom. Call them. They are very helpful and they will help you troubleshoot whatever the issue is. But you should be able to file it online as long as the embassy. That's the other thing. Most embassies should have give you the ability to file it online. Just make sure the embassy does participate in the online filing. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind. If it participates in the online filing, but you're not able to file it online or you're having technical issues, change browsers, and then also, right, change browsers, but also contact technical support. They will be able to walk you through different things that you can do to try to get into that application. All right. All right. Next question. Can I reapply if I got denied once? Yes, but it depends on the reason you were denied. So I'll give you an example. If you are applying for a B2 visa, a visiting visa to the US, and you were denied, for you to reapply, just make sure that you have more documentation for whatever reason the officer denied you. So typically for a B2 visa is that you weren't able to show enough ties, right? You weren't able to show the officer that you will actually go back once you're done with your visit. So if that's the case and you want to reapply, just make sure there's been a difference in your life, right? There's been more ties, there's more things that you can show. But if you're showing the exact same thing that you got denied on in the first place, you may end up being denied again. All right. But if, let's say, it's a green card application that you're applying for, again, the key is why were you denied? That's really the key. Can you reapply? Yes, you can reapply for a green card, but typically where I start with people is I want to see the denial notice for those, because USCIS will send you a denial notice. The embassy does not, right? The embassy does not give you like this is the exact reason we're denying you. But USCIS has to send you, this is the exact reason we're denying you. So we typically look at that to find out exactly what the reasons are and make sure that you have documentation to overcome every single reason. So whatever reason USCIS gives, we want documents, we want things showing that they are wrong. So that when we reapply and those things come up, we already have the documents right there to prove them wrong. All right. So can you reapply? Yes, but you want to know why you were denied and make sure you have more documentation to overcome that reason for the first denial. All right, next question. My mom had an interview at USCIS 3 weeks ago. She didn't get any answer that day. Okay, so most of the time you go to your interview, the officer could say, and that was for a green card. Yeah. So you go to the interview, the officer can say, I'm going to review your file and you'll get something in the mail. That's normal. Okay. They may need to complete a background check. They may need to just review the file and make sure there's nothing they're missing. And sometimes, if it's a newer officer, they have to go through a supervisor. Okay. They can actually approve the case, they can recommend it for approval, and the supervisor will then sign off on it. So they have to go through all those steps. It does not mean there's something wrong unless there was like something that came up in the interview that your mom can think of that could have led to an issue in the case. But if the interview went well, everything was good, you provided all the documentation, it's just a matter of waiting, honestly. You just have to wait. 3 weeks after the interview is not bad. Typically, if we are 60 days after the interview, 90 days after the interview, that's when we really start thinking of following up with USCIS. But if it's only been 3 weeks, give it some time, because sometimes they just have to go through their checks and balances before they can approve it. But have a conversation with your mom. Make sure nothing came up at the interview that could potentially be a problem. And then wait. But feel free to reach out to USCIS if it's like 90 days and nothing yet. Okay. All right. Any new changes for asylum? There's no new changes. There's no new changes, unfortunately. The biggest thing for people to keep in mind with asylum is that you could file, if you're filing a new asylum case, you can file today and get an interview in a month, in 2 months, or you can have an interview in 5 years. So it's kind of like dependent on when you're filing, you may be one of the ones that get your interview right away, or you may be the ones that are waiting years for an interview. I have cases from 2016, 2017, still waiting on interviews. Okay, so there's no changes. The basis for asylum is still the same. You still have to prove persecution. It's just how they're handling the cases, and who's getting interviews is kind of all over the place right now. So if there is, one thing I tell people is, with asylum cases, if there's a reason to expedite, ask for an expedite. Right? But in most situations, everyone that's applying for asylum, most people that are applying for asylum want their interviews so that they can kind of, plead their case and move on. But it's just, the backlog is too much. There's not enough officers. Okay. That's really the key here. There's a huge backlog and there's not enough officers interviewing for those. So therefore, it's taking forever. And asylum cases are those that, like, it's not a 10-minute conversation. It's not a 1-hour conversation. You can be like, an officer can have an asylum interview go for like 5 hours. And they have to do the interview completely, right? To make sure they have all the facts to make a decision. And asylum is one of those things that there is hard for them to retain officers because it can't secondhand trauma is a huge thing for them. So a lot of the officers end up leaving and creates a hole that then other officers have to make up for and backlogs continue. So the little updates is just sim of the same. All right, next question. Michael A. Do US citizens who pass through social orientation are free to marry any gender? Yes. So US citizens are free to marry whoever they want, right? Yeah, there's no limitation on who you can marry based on their sexual or social orientation. Okay? So any gender can get married. All right. So if you have more questions, put them in the comments. Those were really great questions, by the way. I always have to tell y'all, those are really great questions because there's someone out there that has the same question and does not feel comfortable asking it on a live. So thank you for asking your questions. Thank you for joining me. If you have additional questions, please do ask them. Truly, truly appreciate y'all. Let's see. Next thing, my daughter has a green card. Can she file for her father? And how long it takes for me to get work authorization? So, children can file for their parents as long as the children are U.S. citizens. Right? If your child is a permanent resident, your child cannot file for you yet. You have to wait for them to become citizens. And then once they're citizens, they can file for you to get your permanent residency. And typically, once they file that, right now it's taking about 3 months to 6 months to get a work permit through that filing. So it's really good to understand that even though your child is a permanent resident, they cannot file for you. Don't hold it against them. It's not their fault. Okay. It's just the law. The law says they must be citizens before they can file for parents. It's just like siblings, right? In order for a person to file for their siblings, they have to be a US citizen and then they can file that application. A permanent resident cannot file that application. Permanent residents can only file for their spouse, their children that are unmarried. Okay, if once their child gets married, they can no longer file for that child until they themselves become a US citizen. Then they can file for their married children as well. All right, next question. If you didn't get interviewed for the conditional green card, what's the probability of getting interviewed for removal of condition? There's no so there's no hard and fast rule about that. Okay. The question is how much documentation have you do you have of your relationship from the conditional? That's really what it comes down to. So it's not really about you whether you have an interview or not. It's more of from the time you got your conditional to the time you got your that you're now applying for removal of conditions, what evidence of your relationship can you present to USCIS that will make them believe that they can just approve your case without an interview? Right. So you have to make sure that you are documenting everything and providing USCIS enough evidence of your relationship that they have no need to schedule you for an interview. But though I will tell people this, and I always say this, most people are going to have an interview. Most people are going to have an interview. And it's okay if you have an interview. I know we have a phobia of interviews, sitting there, having someone ask you questions about your relationship. I know it. I know it. But that's the norm. Getting your interview waived is not the norm. So I just want to make that clear to people. Like, I've had a couple that were married for like years. They were together for years before they applied for a green card, and they were still interviewed. Okay. So it's not that it's a question of like, oh, we don't believe your relationship. It's just that some offices just like scheduling interviews. Okay. It's the norm. And then some can make a decision based on what they see in the file and can have enough evidence in there that they can justify approving it without an interview. Because remember, the officers have a supervisor. Okay. The officers have a supervisor, and the supervisor can sometimes audit their cases, and they want to make sure that they have enough in there to justify their decision. And if they feel that they may not have enough, or they have some questions that's not answered in your file, they can always schedule an interview. That's what the interview is for, to just answer whatever questions they may have, or to see you and your spouse interact. Okay. Some offices just prefer seeing people in person. So remember, that's the norm. Going in person for an interview is the norm. Getting your interview waived is not. All right. So just make sure you're documenting your case, because it can go either way, right? You could have an interview, you could not have an interview. It's not, there's no probability. I usually tell people you're going to have, just act as if you're going to have an interview, and then rejoice when you don't have an interview. Okay. Prepare like you're going to have an interview, and rejoice when you do not have one. All right. So if you have questions, put them in the comments. Okay. All right. So if you have questions, remember, put them in the comments. And I am just getting the next question up. All right. So do you still have to file both an I-130 and an I-485? I thought you have to only file an I-485 if parent has not overstayed. All right. So this was a comment on a video I did about filing for your parents that overstayed their visa. So as a US citizen, if your parent overstays their visa, you can still apply for them to get their green card. The fact that you're a US citizen waives the fact that they overstayed their visa. And in these situations, this person's asking, oh, I thought you didn't have to file the I-485, only the I-130. Well, the only way for the parent to get a green card, right, to get that permanent residency, is if an I-485 is filed for them. So the I-485 is the actual permanent residency application. Okay. The I-130 is the relative petition. This is saying, this is my parent. Here's documentation that this is my parent. Accept that this is my parent, right? Approve the petition, the relative petition. If you only file a relative petition, all you have done is USCIS has agreed that this is your parent, or this is your spouse, or this is your child. That's it. That's all you have done. Without an I-485, without the actual permanent residency application, without the actual green card application, the I-485, your parent, your spouse, your child has no status. Okay? They will not get a green card just from you filing an I-130. You need to file an I-130 in addition to an I-485. Again, this is if your parent is in the US and overstayed a visa. You can do that for them. Okay. If they're outside of the US, then all you do is the I-130 and then do the consular processing where they go through the National Visa Center and all of that. But if they're physically in the US, they entered with a visa, right? They overstayed the visa. You can still do an I-130 but you must also do an I-485 because that's what's going to get them the actual green card. I've had so many people file just an I-130 or file an I-485, the green card application without the relative petition, the I-130, and of course, without the I-130, your I-485 will be rejected. Okay, because it has to be based on something. So super, super important that I cover that because really it matters. All right. So I do not see any more questions. Thank y'all so much for joining me. As you know, these lives are your time to ask me questions and to get information. So feel free to put your questions in the comments. Even if you're watching this on the replay, ask me your questions. Okay. And I will be back next week where we'll just talk about, immigration updates, what's going on, and things you need to know. So feel free to join me then. And if you have questions, bring them with you as well. Thank you all so much. And I hope you have a great rest of your Friday and a great weekend.